Dani Kapsuchi Dagi Jinsogi Pesanamki Jola Penchil Sangye Joban Shu Sangye Chetang Soki Chonamla Chanchu Patu Dani Kapsuchi Dagi Jinsogi Pesanamki Jola Penchil Sangye Joban Shu Samchen Tamshe Dewa Tong Dewe Kyu Denpa Gyochi Dungne Ki Kyu Tong Delwa Gyochi Dungne Mepe Dewa Tong Ba Min Delwa Gyochi Yerin Shadon Delwe Tanyon Shampo Lane Ba Gyochi Pelden Sawe Lama Poche Dagi Chiwa Beme Denshu Kadri Chen Pegone Jesung Te Kusung Toki Ngajum Sal Tu Sal Chamden De Jambe Yang La Chak Salo Gangi Lo Jedim Ni Twin Netanam Dagram Salwe Jinye Dun Que Jishe Seshe Niki Tukarek Bamzi Gandak Si Betsana Mari Mundundun Gisewe Lutso Kuna Buchi Tase La Du Chu Yang Den Song Luta Chadon Yamon Nilon Leki Chado Doze Ching Marik Mesan Donen Yogo Jinye Jaze Renjinam Dene Dashi Sachu Dansa Yanten Lizo Se Tu Eko Chuda Chudan Chuni Gentre Dak le Mesan Jambe Yang La Du Seden Keki Kena Beseki Dak le Timo Min Padam San Katang Ten She Shulu Topayi Lo Je Pape Non Watsel Tu San. Donc
we began yesterday with the fourth theme of the first section of the entry to the state of a Pandita, which was laid out by Mipham Rinpoche. Yesterday, we went over the explanation of the title of this chapter, and we began the summarized presentation of the subject, dependent arising. The root text says, "What is dependent arising? Inner and outer phenomena did not appear without cause. They are not self-arisen, nor did they appear from time, an all-powerful creator, or some other cause, a permanent agent, which are not causes. They were born based on the coming together of their respective causes and conditions, which themselves are dependently arisen. This is what is called dependent arising. The declaration of such a principle is a unique approach, that of the Buddhist teaching." To understand that dependent arising is a unique approach, that of the Buddhist teaching, as it's stated in the root text, and also to see what differentiates it from other religious and philosophical currents, Khenpo Rinpoche explained 5 points. The first point, which we looked at, was dependent arising. The second was an introduction to non-Buddhist schools of thought. The third point is, what is a school of thought? The fourth point was concerning Buddhist schools of thought and their characteristics. And the fifth point is non-Buddhist schools of thought and their characteristics. Yesterday we reached the fourth point, Buddhist schools of thought and their characteristics. In this section we saw what characterizes an authentic Buddhist. We also looked at the difference between being Buddhist and simply knowing the Four Seals or the Buddhist point of view. We also looked at the four Buddhist schools of thought or established conclusions. We saw that there are two schools within the foundational vehicle, two established conclusions, which are that of the Vaibhashika school of thought and that of the Sautrantika school of thought, and that there are likewise two schools of thought within the great vehicle, the Chittamatra and the Madhyamaka schools of thought. That's where we left off yesterday. So now we come to the final point in this fourth subsection, explaining Buddhist schools of thought. Here, Khenpo Rinpoche shared the difference between the four Buddhist schools of thought and the four Tibetan Buddhist lineages. Following the explanation of the four Buddhist schools of thought, he said, perhaps now you may have some doubts, because we also talk about the four traditions of Tibet, the Nyingma, Sakya, Kagyu, and Gelug traditions. He said, perhaps you're wondering, what is the relationship to the four established conclusions? The established conclusions being the Vaibhashika, Sautrantika, Chittamatra, and Madhyamaka. What Khenpo explained is that the four Tibetan Buddhist traditions are not schools of thought. They are not established conclusions. They are different transmission lineages of the Dharma. And these different transmission lineages of the Dharma follow the established conclusions of the great vehicle. In other words, the Chittamatra and Madhyamaka schools of thought. And Khenpo clarified that these four traditions involve elements of the Chittamatra school of thought, but they all identify as being Madhyamaka. Furthermore, these four lineages of Tibetan Buddhism also adhere to the vehicle of the secret mantra, also known as the vehicle of the fruit. So we may ask ourselves, is the Vajrayana an established conclusion of its own or its own school of thought? Khenpo Rinpoche replies, no, it's not its own school of thought. It is a subdivision of Mahayana Buddhism. We mentioned this yesterday in relation to a question. The Vajrayana is a subdivision of Mahayana Buddhism. In the Mahayana, there are two subdivisions: the causal vehicle and the resultant vehicle, or the vehicle of the fruit. The causal vehicle is also called the Sutrayana, and the vehicle of the fruit is also called the Tantrayana or the Vajrayana. So, whether concerning the causal vehicle or the vehicle of the fruit, the basis, path, and fruit presentation. This presentation of basis, path, and fruit is found in both vehicles, in the causal vehicle and the vehicle of the fruit. In terms of the basis, path, and fruit, it's the same. We may wonder what the difference is between the causal vehicle and the vehicle of the fruit. The causal vehicle lays out methods that act as causes in order to attain enlightenment. Whereas the vehicle of the fruit lays out perspectives of enlightenment that are methods used on the path. The causal vehicle lays out methods that act as a cause to attain enlightenment. The vehicle of the fruit lays out perspectives of enlightenment that are used on the path. The vehicle of the fruit lays out perspectives of enlightenment that are themselves methods used on the path. This will become clearer. The vehicle of the fruit is called this because we possess the capacity to practice the fruit already. In the vehicle of the fruit, we practice from the beginning in relationship to the fruit, in relation to enlightenment. We will incorporate the fruit or perspectives of enlightenment into our practice. This vehicle involves many higher methods, and these higher methods allow for practicing the qualities that are obtained at the moment of fruit on the path. These higher methods, these excellent methods, allow for practicing the qualities that are obtained at the moment of fruit on the path. And due to this, the fruit can be obtained rapidly, more rapidly than with the Sutrayana. Is it clear, or shall we repeat? It's not very clear. The causal vehicle will lay out methods that act as causes, for example, the practices of the paramitas. In the vehicle of the fruit, we will immediately work from the basis of the fruit. It's said that as of now, we have the ability to practice the fruit. We have the ability to incorporate enlightenment in our practice, even as beginners. Even though we're not at the level of the fruit, we can already practice the fruit, consider it, take it into account in our practice. There are methods, many methods like this, which allow for practicing perspectives or the qualities of enlightenment that we attain at the moment of the fruit on the path. For example, this isn't really the subject of the text. I can't say much more. This relates to Vajrayana practices. For example, considering Buddha nature, the fact that we already possess enlightenment in and of itself will envision Buddha nature by way of a yidam, etc. The nature of the methods is the only difference between the causal vehicle and the vehicle of the fruit. And the only difference between the causal vehicle and the vehicle of the fruit is the nature of the methods. If we compare them in terms of their established conclusion, there is no difference between these two. No, I'm not asking a question just for nothing. In relation to the causal vehicle or the vehicle of the fruit, does this relate to the two visions that we can have? Those who will attain enlightenment by developing the qualities, but don't necessarily have the qualities, will develop these qualities, and then those who believe that we already have the qualities and we just have to reveal them. So do these two methods relate to these two different perspectives? Well, in the causal vehicle, we'll use methods that allow for realizing the fruit, but we won't envision the fruit as we do with a yidam practice, where we already visualize ourselves as being enlightened. And in that case, we practice as being enlightened. Yeah, I got that, but I'm wondering if in relation to this vision, we see that we don't necessarily have the qualities of a Buddha, but it's something we'll develop based on the paramitas. So is the causal vehicle based on this view, and the idea of the vehicle of the fruit, where we'll become enlightened based on yidam practice, awaken the qualities in us? Does that correspond more to this fruit? You know, we saw Rangtong and Shengtong approaches in the ayatanas. There are these two perspectives. Do these two vehicles correspond to these two visions? No, it doesn't quite correspond. We'll talk about Rangtong and Shengtong after, and it's not equivalent in terms of the causal vehicle and the vehicle of the fruit. Yes, as you said, in the Rangtong school, qualities will be developed little by little, and in the Shengtong school, they're already present, but it's not quite the same thing. We'll see what Rangtong and Shengtong are. Maybe it will get clear. So there were discussions over the centuries between the different schools of Tibetan Buddhism, and we might ask ourselves why there were all of these discussions. What Khenpo said is that it's not really a question of disagreements. All of these Tibetan Buddhist lineages belong to the Madhyamaka school of thought. They all call themselves Madhyamaka, so they share the same view. These discussions didn't concern really disagreements between them. Rather, when the different lineages discussed, exchanged about various things, they were debates about how to use the terms, and if the use of the terms could lead to, or not, the authentic state of enlightenment. So they weren't really essential discussions or disagreements about the fruit or the view as they all relate to the Madhyamaka school of thought. Rather, they were debates about how to use the terms and whether these terms could lead to enlightenment or not. Olivier just told us that all of the lineages of Tibetan Buddhism adhere to the Madhyamaka school of thought, and that the debates between the four lineages led to differences between the points of view. Now we will explain the two divisions in the Madhyamaka school of thought. The Madhyamaka can be split into Rangtong Madhyamaka and Shentong Madhyamaka. Rangtong, R-A-N-G-T-O-N-G, and Shentong, S-H-E-N-T-O-N-G. So here, Khenpo will explain the differences between these two divisions, the Rangtong and Shentong. First, there will be a very concise explanation of these two, and then a detailed explanation. If you don't understand the concise explanation, that's normal. It's very concise. The Rangtong division primarily bases its interpretation of the Madhyamaka school of thought on the writings of Prajnaparamita. Prajnaparamita, P-R-A-J-N-A-P-A-R-A-M-I-T-A. So the Rangtong school primarily bases its interpretation on the writings on Prajnaparamita. What is Prajnaparamita? It is higher knowledge that transcends the world. Higher knowledge that transcends the world. And Khenpo clarifies here that Prajnaparamita is indeed a transmission that comes from the Buddha. Prajnaparamita is higher knowledge that knows emptiness, that knows the absence of essence of all phenomena. Emptiness, absence of essence of all phenomena. This is the same thing. According to this Rangtong division, this emptiness is the fact that all phenomena, whether individuals or other things, all these phenomena are in and of themselves empty of a self. This is the point of view of the Rangtong division. Rang means self and Tong means empty. Empty of a self. So this is the very concise presentation. Now we'll look at the concise presentation of the Shentong division. Shen means other, and tong again means empty. The interpretation of the Madhyamaka point of view by the Shentong division is somewhat different. Shentong masters define emptiness as being empty of what is other. Shen, other. So empty of what is other than itself. Shentong masters define emptiness as being empty of what is other than itself. Thus, it is empty of all that is not emptiness. This point of view does not exclude the previous point of view, the Rongtong point of view. It is simply different. This point of view doesn't emphasize the absence of a self, but rather the absence of what is other than emptiness. Don't worry, there will be more details on this later. So we'll start with the first division, empty of self, the Rongtong division. The Indian Buddhist, who is known for efforts in explaining this point of view, is Nagarjuna. 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 Nagarjuna wrote many treatises that elucidate the subject of Prajnaparamita, this higher knowledge that transcends the world. It transcends the world because it knows the true nature of reality. In other words, knows emptiness. Thus, this higher knowledge that knows the true nature of reality is not contaminated by samsaric mind's functioning. In this way, it is said that it transcends the world. It transcends samsara. One of the treatises written by Nagarjuna, which elucidates this subject of Prajnaparamita, is called the Fundamental Treatise, which exposes the Madhyamaka point of view concerning higher knowledge. And khenpo says there are other types of higher knowledge, but this is the highest, the one that transcends the world, that knows emptiness exactly. Prajnaparamita, in other words, the Buddha's teachings, given in order to explain this type of higher knowledge, make up the second turning of the wheel of the Dharma. So, just for a short explanation, there are several ways of explaining, of classifying the teachings. Khenpo Rinpoche didn't state this here, I'm just adding this for you. There are various ways of classifying the Buddha's teachings, including this way: the first turning of the wheel, the second turning of the wheel, the third turning of the wheel. Prajnaparamita is part of the second turning of the wheel. Concerning Tibetan translations of the writings on Prajnaparamita, there are various collections. There is an extensive collection of 12 volumes that lays out the words spoken by Buddha Shakyamuni in 100,000 verses, what he explained concerning this type of higher knowledge. It's what is called the extensive collection. There is also a middling collection in 3 volumes that lays out the same subject, but in a less extensive manner, made up of 3 volumes. Then there is a third collection, which is shorter still, made up of a single volume. There is also a fourth collection that's quite short, made up of very short sutras that shares the words that Buddha Shakyamuni pronounced on this subject. An example of these very short sutras from the Prajnaparamita is that of the Heart Sutra, which perhaps you have heard of. Now the question is, why did Nagarjuna write these numerous treatises which allow for elucidating the subject of Prajnaparamita? Because many practitioners of the Buddhist path encounter difficulties in acquiring knowledge of this subject solely based on the sutras. Quite often, the words stated in Shakyamuni Buddha's teachings, in his sutras, are very condensed. They are very brief teachings. As a result, numerous practitioners had and have difficulties acquiring thorough knowledge of this subject by studying them, as it's quite condensed. People have difficulty acquiring good knowledge of the subject. Thus, Nagarjuna's explanations go into greater detail, and this is why Nagarjuna wrote all of these treatises, in order to lay out these details and help practitioners. Who was Nagarjuna? In the Lankavatara Sutra, the words of Buddha Shakyamuni are reported. He said the following about Nagarjuna. Roughly 400 years after my parinirvana, a child will be born in the Peta region of southern India in a family of Brahmins. He will take the ordination of a Buddhist monk and will be known under the names of Man of Glory and Nagarjuna. The Buddha continued, saying, he will reach a level of higher knowledge where he will truly elucidate the meaning of the points of view of the highest school of thought that I laid out. This refers to the Madhyamaka school of thought. He will thus refute mistaken points of view in relation to the nature of reality. In other words, ideas that are associated with eternalism or annihilism, which we discussed yesterday. This is what the Buddha said on Nagarjuna. The region of Petta in southern India is today called Kerala. Nagarjuna was born in this region. He attended the Buddhist University of Nalanda, where he connected with various masters, and particularly the Indian Buddhist master Saraha. In the world, Nagarjuna is the one who determined the school of thought of the Madhyamaka view in a definitive way. He elucidated all the details of the points of view of this school. What did he explain? He explained that all phenomena, both inner and outer, have never been produced. All of these phenomena are unborn. What is unborn refers to the nature of emptiness. There is no truly existing birth. There is nothing other than dependent arising. Dependent arising is simply a process where the functioning of certain causes and conditions produces different results. I'll repeat the sentence. Dependent arising is simply a process where the functioning of certain causes and conditions produces different results. Nagarjuna also explained that if the existence of a phenomenon is truly established, if we say that a phenomenon is truly existing, then its birth must also be truly existing. If we establish the existence of a phenomenon, we must be able to establish its birth. And if the existence of this birth is truly established, we should be able to point out this birth. We should be able to find it. However, Nagarjuna demonstrates that it is impossible to point out this birth. There is no point in time where something is truly born. It is simply a process, a series of events. Let's consider an example to help with understanding. That of a seed planted in fertile soil and which has produced a plant. Ask yourself the following question. The plant that we see as being the result of the seed, did this plant exist before with the seed? Was it already present within the seed? is the plant that will manifest later present in the seed from the beginning or not? If you come to the conclusion that the plant already existed within the seed, this means that the plant was present at the moment of the seed. So then why would it be necessary to have a process of development from the seed to the plant? Why would we need the plant to grow if it was already there in the seed? It wouldn't be necessary if the plant were already there. In this case, okay, on timing, it is a bit complex. In this case, we cannot say that the seed produces the plant and that the plant's birth is an event that truly exists. Indeed, in this case, we can't say that the seed produces the plant and that the plant's birth is a truly existing event. Indeed, there would be no need for birth or if you say that the plant is present in the seed from the beginning. Why then would we need to plant the seed in fertile soil if the plant is already in the seed? This is a first debate, we can say. On the other hand, if your conclusion is that the seed did not already exist in the seed, a second possibility, that there is no presence of the plant in the seed from the beginning, this means that the plant and the seed are two phenomena that are completely disconnected. Because the plant did not exist within the seed. Thus, these two phenomena are completely disconnected, separate. However, with this proposition, it is not possible for a seed to produce a plant that is completely separate from it. A seed cannot produce what exists completely separate from itself. How are you all doing? Okay. This example illustrates what Nagarjuna explained. If the existence of a phenomenon is truly established as being truly existent, then its birth must also be. In this case, we must be able to prove this birth, to point it out, to identify it. As we saw, we cannot say that the plant already existed prior to its manifestation, and we also cannot say that it did not exist at all before its birth, because in that case the cause and the effect are disconnected, which makes the production of the plant by the seed impossible. According to Nagarjuna, these two possibilities are impossible. So now we may ask ourselves the question, how does the plant appear from the seed according to him? We'd like to know. He says that it is simply a chain of events the seed and the plant are merely a process of dependent arising. There is no truly existing cause, a seed for example, that brings about the truly existing birth of a truly existing result. There is no specific point in time that we can identify where we can say, this is the moment when the plant has manifested. We will not find such a point. All of this is impossible. We cannot find birth as a truly existing event. There is simply a series of events. This is why we talk about a process of dependent arising, where causes and conditions come together, connect, and contribute to the appearance of results. Now we will continue our analysis. If something is not truly born, if the birth of this thing has not taken place, then this thing can never truly cease either. If it is not born, it will also not cease. Its cessation is not real either. Thus, there is nothing real in relation to the seed and the plant. What is present is a series of events where there is a functioning of causes and conditions that bring about a result. We cannot find a true birth of this plant, nor true cessation. This is how the truly established existence of birth and death, or birth and cessation, is refuted. We say that phenomena are empty of essence or of their own nature. This is the Rangtong point of view. This concludes the explanations on the Rangtong point of view. Why don't we take a short silent break? Now that we've looked at the first subdivision of the Madhyamaka school of thought, that of the Rangtong point of view, we will look at the second subdivision, the Shentong point of view. Khenpo Rinpoche went into less detail concerning this point of view. What he said is that the Shentong point of view was taught by the Buddha in 21 sutras of the last turning of the wheel. Within these 21 sutras of the last turning of the wheel, the Buddha taught in a detailed way on this Shentong point of view, notably using reasoning and examples. What is explained in these 21 sutras in relation to Shentong is that all relative phenomena are empty of a self, but that the nature of mind is luminosity, that mind's nature is that of luminosity, that is not a simple vacuum. What is explained in these 21 sutras in relation to the Shentong view is that all relative phenomena are empty of a self, but that the nature of mind itself is luminosity. It is not simply a vacuum. Emptiness, the absence of self, is more focused on phenomena. In the Rangtong point of view, it's more general, whereas in the Shentong point of view, it's more concerning relative phenomena. And concerning the nature of mind, it is said that it is not simply empty, not simply a vacuum, but that there are qualities. That this nature of mind is luminosity, that there is the capacity for knowledge, illuminating knowledge. This comes from, or relates to, the term usel in Tibetan, clear light or illuminating knowledge. That in terms of mind, it is not simply empty or a vacuum, but there is this capacity for knowledge that is there. It's not truly existing. This is why it's not contradictory with the Rangtong point of view. These qualities are not said to be truly existing. They are also emptiness, but the focal point is on the fact that there are qualities. It's not just empty, not just a vacuum. Okay. This Shentong point of view is laid out in an extensive way in the Seng treatises composed by Maitreya through a Sangha, and notably in the treatise called the Gyulama. There are numerous Indian and Tibetan Buddhist masters who taught this point of view. In Tibetan Buddhism, there are many masters who adopted the Rangtong point of view and many others who adopted the Shentong point of view. Over the course of the centuries in Tibet, there were many discussions concerning how these two points of view need to be understood. So concerning the question, Rangtong and Shentong are more points of view of the Mahayana, whereas the Sutrayana and Mantrayana are more vehicles or methods for reaching enlightenment. The 4 lineages of Tibetan Buddhism adhere to the Madhyamaka school of thought, either Rangtong Madhyamaka or Shentong Madhyamaka. Concerning dependent arising, if we come back to the 4 established conclusions, the 4 schools of thought, Vaibhashika, Sautrantika, Chittamatra, and Madhyamaka, these 4 schools of thought adopt the point of view that all things are dependent appearances. The differences among these schools of thought simply lie in the way that the schools define the true nature of these dependent appearances. Now we have concluded the 4th point, which laid out Buddhist schools and their characteristics. This brings us to the 5th point, which is the presentation of non-Buddhist schools of thought. Khenpo Rinpoche explained that we encounter non-Buddhist schools of thought often in different parts of the world. The debates between Buddhist schools of thought and non-Buddhist schools of thought that are reported in the sutras concern Indian schools of thought, because at the time there was no connection between Buddhist schools of thought and schools of thought in other countries. As it's stated in the root text, there are 2 non-Buddhist schools of thought: those who hold the school of thought or established conclusion that things appear without cause, or the school of thought established conclusion that affirms that things appear from causes which are not causes. We'll begin by presenting schools of thought who hold that phenomena appear without cause. These schools of thought are also called annihilist schools. This point of view, that phenomena appear without cause, is refuted by Buddhism. As we saw in the root text, it is said, inner and outer phenomena did not appear without cause. These schools of thought, which affirm that phenomena are born without cause, were already present in India before the Buddha's birth and appearance in this world. One of these schools of thought was called the Charya or Charvaka school of thought. It is known within Buddhist and non-Buddhist traditions. The founder of this school was known by 3 different names. One of these names was Thursday Rishi. In terms of the day of the week, he was called Thursday. Thursday Rishi. Rishi in ancient India was given to religious people who had a certain ability. That was true in ancient India, and it's still true today. We can find religious men who have a certain ability and are given this title, Rishi. This individual also was known by the name the Eyes of the World, and the third name was Guru of the Gods. It was said that this Rishi descended from the world of the demigods to the human world. Other sources said that he descended from the world of the gods, and thus the name Guru of the Gods. Regardless of where he came from, this Thursday Rishi took part in wars between the gods and the demigods. Many people who were alongside the Rishi refused to participate in the combats because they were afraid of the karmic consequences resulting from taking part in these wars. This Rishi adopted the point of view that the functioning of karma, actions and their effects, is not valid. And so for him, participating in these wars had no consequences. He encouraged his disciples to adopt his point of view. This is how this school of thought, which denies the functioning of causes and effects of karma, came to be. In the human world, sometime before and after Shakyamuni Buddha's appearance, India was divided into many kingdoms. Very often, the kings of these kingdoms went to war with one another. Many of these kings adopted this point of view of the absence of causes, because in this way, it was quite easy for them to lead wars against other kings and encourage their subjects to participate. They just said there are no consequences to all of this, so there's no problem in taking part. Next, Khenpo explained how the adepts of this Shravaka school of thought established their point of view. The Shravaka school of thought established their point of view based on reasoning and example. Concerning their reasoning, they said that past lives do not exist because they are not visible, and future lives also do not exist because they are not visible. Likewise, liberation is not something visible and therefore does not exist. That's what they say. Because we cannot perceive these things, past lives, future lives, liberation, they do not exist. Therefore, why go to trouble to obtain a good rebirth and to obtain liberation, as this does not exist? There's no reason to go to trouble for all of this. They say that there is no meaning in engaging in specific conduct with ethical codes and the difficulties that go along with this, that would lead to good rebirth and liberation. They say that instead of bothering with all of this, all of these things that lead to nothing, they say that it's better to focus on the pleasures of this life, to do what you want, do what brings you pleasure, to increase your happiness. They say that there's nothing to do besides this because future lives do not exist. For them, when they say that there are past lives, future lives, liberation, they say that this is just made-up stories invented by religious dignitaries in order to trick people. The adepts of this school of thought likewise say that beings are born and they do not need past lives for this. In order to illustrate this theory, the adepts of this school of thought give an example. They say if there's rain in a forest, it will create moisture. If there's heat from the sun's rays, then mushrooms will grow everywhere. But nobody planted these mushrooms. They simply manifest without any particular reason. They give this example of mushrooms growing in the forest in order to prove that things appear without a cause. But this logic is mistaken. We cannot deny the existence of something simply based on the fact that we don't see it. For example, we can't say that there's no intestine in my stomach because it's not visible. It's not because my intestines can't be perceived that they don't exist. There's another example given. They say that when we die, the body is incinerated and the ashes are carried away by the wind. Nothing remains. So what could be born again? In this tradition, they believe that consciousness comes from the four elements, that it is made up of matter, that consciousness is material. Therefore, once the body has been burned, consciousness disappears at the same time as the body. Mind and body are no longer present when the body is incinerated. So what then could take rebirth if everything has disappeared? Nothing can be reborn because nothing remains. For them, thus, there are no future lives. There's nothing after death. And therefore, this Sharvaka school of thought affirms that all things are produced without a cause. What is the final point or purpose of this school of thought? As we saw, their goal is to say that traditions that believe in the law of cause and effect are tricking us. And their second goal is to give a justification for just enjoying one's life. Nothing is important because everything appears without cause, randomly. Thus, we can do whatever we want. To conclude about this school, there's a final section. We won't have time for questions today. You can keep them for tomorrow. So next comes a remark concerning the absence of cause. As it was said, this school of thought affirms that everything is produced without a cause. Nevertheless, what it is necessary to know is that for this point of view on the absence of cause does not apply to the birth of a seedling after having planted a seed. It doesn't apply to this absence of cause. This absence of cause doesn't apply to the appearance of a seedling planted from a seed. This school of thought doesn't explain that the rice seedling has no cause. Their point of view doesn't concern this. So what's their primary point of view? Their main point of view concerns karma, the relationships of causes to effects, and past and future lives, as well as liberation, which they hold do not exist. Today in India, we no longer find individuals belonging to this Charvaka school of thought. Nevertheless, there are many people in the world today who think this way without necessarily belonging to a particular school of thought. They hold this nihilist school point of view. It's something that they maintain that if something can't be seen, can't be heard, can't be touched, can't be perceived by way of direct knowledge, then this thing does not exist. There's no judgment here, it's just an observation. Some people think that future lives do not exist, and that what is most important is improving their standard of living today. Khenpo says then the idea is mainly earning money to have a comfortable house, a nice car. Most people today are concerned by this approach. And then there are those who analyze and reflect on the subject and in this way are part of a school of thought. So this concludes the nihilist point of view. The root text says, "Inner and outer phenomena did not appear without cause." This sentence, written by Mipham Rinpoche in the root text, refutes the nihilist point of view that was just explained. So we'll conclude here for today. We'll look at the eternalist point of view and schools of thought tomorrow, so we can take a few questions here. So first, beforehand, somebody asked me how to spell khenpo Chödrak. So khenpo is Khenpo, and Chödrak in English is spelled CHO, normally with an umlaut over the O, DRAK. So, according to the explanations on Rongtong and Shentong, I don't really understand the difference in what's said in Shentong. It says all relative phenomena are empty of a self, the nature of mind is luminosity. However, this doesn't mean that beings are endowed with a self. It doesn't mean that beings are empty of a self. The nature of mind is present in all beings. It doesn't seem to contradict the first one. And then a question within this is concerning the Karmakagyu school, which of these views does it adhere to? I'm not sure if the first question is clear. As it was said, the Madhyamaka Shentong school says that the nature of mind is not simply a vacuum. It also has this quality of luminosity that is present. However, all relative phenomena are empty of a self, but when we talk about the nature of mind, it is not simply empty or simply a vacuum. The Shentong school also maintains the emptiness of self, but the emphasis is placed on mind's luminosity, whereas in the Rongtong perspective, this aspect of luminosity is not developed. It's not really contradictory, and it's not said here, but it's said later on. It's simply different perspectives, two different ways of looking at the same phenomenon. The question for me is that the luminosity of mind's nature is empty of a self. Is that correct? Yes. Luminosity is not truly existing. There's no identity to it. It is within the context of emptiness. The qualities that are there are... The idea is that when we talk about the emptiness of phenomena, it doesn't mean that there's a vacuum either, but in the Shentong school, they specify that there is this aspect of emptiness that is illuminating. And so the Karmakagyu school belongs to or adheres to the Shentong Madhyamaka point of view. Hi. Can you clarify something? So the four schools of thought, Vaibhashika, Sautrantika, the four, you know what I'm talking about. Considering that all of the Buddhist lineages are Madhyamaka, what about the other three? Were they abandoned when the Buddha arrived? All of the lineages of Tibetan Buddhism say that they adhere to the Madhyamaka, the fourth school of thought, but that's only in Tibet. In India, the four schools of thought were present: the Vaibhashika school, Sautrantika school, Chittamatra, and Madhyamaka. And in other countries, there are certain places where the foundational vehicle was more established, and we find these schools of thought more present in any time in India, and up until Buddhism disappeared from India in the 11th century, these four schools of thought were present in India. Coming back to Rongtong and Shentong, when you defined them in the concise way, the first was Rongtong, empty of self, and for the second one, I wrote down empty of what is other. Did I write that down correctly? Yes, you wrote it correctly. So empty of self was explained clearly after, but I didn't really get any development on empty of what is other. Can you add anything to that? Let me go back to my notes. Other refers to mental elaborations. Empty of everything that is different or other than itself. Empty of all that is relative reality. Empty of all mental elaborations. That's what I understood. Khenpo didn't elaborate on this here. The explanation, according to the word, Shen is other, Tong is empty, empty of other things. In other words, empty of anything other than emptiness or luminosity. In relation to the explanation that followed, this refers to the fact that this luminosity is present. This illuminating knowledge is present. And so this is empty of other things besides this. It shows the fact that there are indeed qualities of mind, this luminosity. Whereas for Rangtong, it simply talks about emptiness of self. In the Shentong, it's not just emptiness of self, but empty of other things besides this emptiness that is also illuminating knowledge. It is empty of anything that is other than these qualities of mind that are illuminating, that are also emptiness. It shows that there's nothing besides this luminosity. It points to the fact that these qualities are also present, qualities of luminosity. It is a complex subject. It just gives a brief idea. So concerning a flower, if we say that it's empty of the empty of what isn't flower and full of flowerness? No, that's not what's at hand here. There, in that sense, for a flower, there's no difference between Shentong and Rangtong. In Shentong, all relative phenomena are empty of self. In that case, emptiness is seen in the same way in Rangtong and Shentong. Simply in relation to mind, in Shentong perspective, the accent, the emphasis is on the fact that it's not just empty. There are also qualities to mind, but it doesn't relate to flowers. I don't have a question, but I was taking notes and there are certain gaps concerning emptiness as Barbara was explaining it. However, it shows that it's impossible to prove this birth. It's just a process of dependent appearance. There's just a series of events, a series of causes and conditions. Okay, conditions, that's what I missed. And then something, it ends with results. That leads to a result. Yes, that's a sentence. Causes and conditions that bring about a result. That's the sentence. In a very schematic way. If we're going to summarize things in a really zoomed out way, it's a little bit like a glass empty and a glass full. It seems like the Rangtong and the Shentong sort of round each other out. that's how I used to explain emptiness to people who would ask about it. I don't really know much about it, but if I was talking with friends, I would say phenomena are empty of any true nature, but emptiness is also light or space. Or are they really two completely different things? No, they're not two completely different things. In another context, a khenpo who came recently explained that there are two different ways of looking at the same thing. They're just different approaches. The Rangtong school focuses more on the emptiness aspect, and the Shentong school focuses on this aspect of luminosity of mind, but while also incorporating emptiness. It's not said that mind is something real. Simply, emphasis is placed on the aspect of luminosity or illuminating knowledge. And in Tibetan Buddhism, which lineage adheres to Rangtong perspective? Are there lineages that focus more on one or the other? Different masters within the same lineage can have different points of view. In general, the Karma Kagyu school is more focused on the Shentong point of view. The Gelug school is more focused on Rangtong. The Sakya school more Rangtong, but there is some Shentong present. That's our time for today. Just for a word, somebody has a question. So, what was Shentong based on? The 21 sutras of the final turning of the Dharma wheel. Thank you very much. See you tomorrow.
Yi tamshe zipani tomne nyepe chana panjene kegana chi balam chupayi sibet sole jowa jowa shom.